Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression
It was a deeply emotional
of
moment
one
for
by
me.
another.
It's something I never experienced before. Standing in a queue with people from 5 o'clock in the morning and putting the cross and knowing that I now, for the first time in my entire life, was seen as a citizen and respected for it. And one of the first things we did was went to every single place where there was a non-white or black or white sign and sit on that bench, or go to the Durban beach where I was never allowed to set my foot in that water and walk in the water. So we knew that with the advent of this new democracy, things would change. DDP was founded in 1993. Before this, a lot of work was being done by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in South Africa.
Our overall aim throughout the world is strengthening democracy. As a civil society organization, Konrad Adenauer cooperates generally with civil society organizations like DDP in South Africa.
And the thought was, how do we create an institution, an organization that can help in the rebuilding of this nation post-apartheid? And we lived in a province that was really regarded as the killing fields of South Africa at that time.
At that time, you would recall that it was the height of the violence between the ANC and the IFP.
At that time, the Inkatha Freedom Party was in two minds about even being a part of the negotiated process. And the lines were drawn basically for a pretty bloody battle. Hundreds of people had lost their lives. The contestation was really fierce.
I became really very interested in really empowering my colleagues with negotiating skills, conflict resolution mechanisms, and so on. And I think DDP came very handy at that time because there was no other organization that was really trying to do something.
And DDP was very instrumental in working with that first coalition government to bring the IFP and ANC into the same space to talk about creating a common future in this province. So the first joint cabinet was actually workshopped by DDP, and was the only organization that both parties accepted could be a mediator into the discussion. To me, that was really significant, because we had many other big organizations in the country, and both the IFP and ANC chose DDP to be in that space to do it. The Rainbow Nation was an ideal principle of what we'd like it to be, but that requires work and muscles and a will to want to shift ourselves into a new space of understanding, to meet each other as citizens for the first time.
Many people thought that 1994 marked the arrival of democracy and the end of the struggle, but we're seeing that democracy began in 1994. It wasn't something that was achieved and that we now have, and we don't need to safeguard or protect or work towards. So DDP is important in that it takes that election as the starting point and then really works to say, what does democracy mean to each one of us? The main methodology is about bringing different stakeholders into the same space to talk. So finding people who might set themselves up as oppositional on certain issues, or don't see the connections between themselves, and bringing them into one space.
But facilitated in a way that the voice is protected, whether it's black, white, or brown. But the notion, I am a South African citizen, I've chosen to be here, this is my country, and I want to contribute to building a new future. And everything is done with the clear intention that people are the experts on their own lives. Give them the space to talk, and every single time they will have answers and wisdom that you would not have believed possible.
DDP is one of the most important institutions, not in KZN, but in South Africa.
There came at a time when it was very much needed within this community. If you look at Lavendale per se, we've got 195 NGOs, NPOs, CPOs.
Well, I think when I started, I recognized that throughout the Western Cape we were holding dialogues. There was dialogues being held at universities, there were dialogues being held in the central CBD, and I thought the same conversations need to be had with people on the ground. And nobody was willing to do that, and all it took was a bit of investment, and we had very little funds to do that, or we were given very little funds to do that. But getting the people into the space gave them an opportunity to get access to information. And then it became their project when we formed a steering committee.
So DDP started the community dialogues, which was absolutely fantastic because it gave us a space to not only debate and talk about common goals, which we discovered within the process, but also how we can work together to make that happen.
We had many stakeholder players or role players where they came in and they left the community just as is the organizations. And here we're sitting with an organization that didn't leave us just along the road. For the time they're with us. And we know at least with DDP being our backbone, we will have a better community on the end of the day.
We do a lot in the community, but I don't scanner, but nobody do something for us. So DDP provide for that.
And it was also good, the platform in terms of meeting other organizations, other role players that we probably never would have gotten to meet.
An example, when we started in Lavendale, they didn't even know who their ward councillor was, nor did they know who their ward committee was. Now they're part of that ward committee and they hold the councillor accountable, and that's the shift that is necessary for them to be disciplined and organised.
I think DDP must come more in and come with workshops and feed the people. More teachers, like feed them more skills and give them what they want.
The nicest thing, or one thing that I appreciate about DDP, is that we are not channeled into one way of working.
A big part of our work as DDP is to also provide capacity for civil society organizations in the country.
The leadership training that I received through DDP is for me the most profound experience and impact on my own leadership at a local level. I've participated in a number of leadership programs with them, and I also engage in spaces that constantly support my leadership in the community.
The EU project was about training the civil society organization and city councillors in the methodology of transformational dialogues, that they can go back to the work they do, to give them an approach which will structure these interactions or this engagement with the community they work with in a different way.
Our work with government leaders is essential to our work in building South Africa's democracy.
Collaboration with organizations such as DDP, as non-governmental, with government institutions like the CDW program, is an important role where we partake in ensuring that our people feel that they are part of the development that should benefit them.
In 1993, with the elections, the first independent electoral commission was established, and part of their work was to educate literally millions of people about voter education and look for local partners to do so. And DDP was one of the organizations that spearheaded the voter education drive in KwaZulu-Natal. And that coalition exists up to this day, and is in fact the only coalition of its kind in South Africa. We need a different way of thinking. I don't know what that way is, but I know for it to happen, we have to get all the voices in the room, especially the next generation, because we can't create a future without them, for them.
And now what we are doing as DDP to work with the youth in schools, it helps them to reflect at our history and also try and see what the future holds for them.
I got involved with youth last year, and again we used transformational dialogues as a tool to work with them.
Most of the time young people are so used to pointing at somebody else to make the change for them. So I am proud, I'm really proud to work with those kids who are actually part of changing their own environment.
And MAD, of course, is making a difference with the youth organization or the learner-centered organization that grew out of our learning
from the initial DDP workshop. And the work has extended into the community, and the community building work has been very, very successful.
I don't see it as much as helping somebody. I see it more as doing justice to someone, because I don't believe that it's fair for people that are born in certain places, born in certain ways, who they are, to hold them back from who they want to be.
We help the community, like for an example, the reading project. We believe that the education is very important in our community. So we have a reading project where we teach our learners how to read properly, and it'll help them with their work. We also have lunches every day. People from the school, anyone, even if they're not in the mat, they all help by bringing maybe 1 or 2 slices of lunch for the indigent learners.
We belong together. We belong to each other. We can support each other to live better lives. And that's the kind of thing I hope that they're getting out of the programs, and I hope that that is the kind of thing that will stay behind.
That's why I say the youth is the most important, that I feel, the group that we work with, because that is our future leaders, which will one day change South Africa.
The DDP Arts Express initiative was basically established to give voice and help to assist young and up-and-coming artists. Art plays a vital role in society in terms of holding a mirror up to society to give us the opportunity to look at ourselves in a fresh and different way.
We need an infusion of new ideas, of new energy into this space.
We decided to use some of the resources that we do have to support some up-and-coming arts organizations, and we do capacity building training with them, allowing them to develop their business skills. And also, in return, we are able to bring some of the gifts and the talents that they have into our conversations by inviting their poets and their artists and their dramatists and dancers to come and perform during some of our events.
Years into the democracy, I think we're still asking, where's the democracy? What is the democracy? And I think the spaces that DDP creates are the spaces that help us to engage with that and to ask, how can we strengthen and make the democracy work?
In terms of the successes of South Africa, I think we've had many successes. We're very hard on ourselves in terms of what we haven't done. But when you look at the figures of the amount of housing we provided and the other kind of work, and the difficult situation of dismantling a system that kept us apart, it gives us a more sobering perspective on what we've been able to achieve.
Something that's about building the future, about looking at what we can do together.
I certainly do think that by just looking at the successes of Lavendale, we have a big stake in it. And as long as we can go in consciously, not needing to hold the power, but to devolve that power. That's the answer.
The kind of relationship that we have with DDP is a very encouraging relationship, a very affirming relationship, a relationship that recognizes who you are, what you bring, recognizes people, what people have, what they are, what they can be. And I think that I really appreciate that about DDP.
One can be the change.
There's a famous poem by a poet called Percy Bysshe Shelley. It's called Ode to the West Wind. And it ends with the words, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? And the line has a lot of symbolism for me. And at the moment, this country is in its winter, almost feeling things are very dark and very depressing. And I would hope that our spring, in a symbolic sense, is around the corner.
When we look back over the last 20 years as DDP and the role we've played in South Africa up to this stage, and to some extent our story is woven to the fabric of the story of South Africa, I've got no doubt that in the next 20-year period, our work will also evolve as the challenges change and as the young democracy starts to mature. So for us as DAP, it's not just a question of responding to what we see, but also setting new pathways and new journeys, asking new uncomfortable questions, so that together we can start co-creating the new story for South Africa.
Get